start recording. So we are here. Hello, thank you for joining me. Let's start with the basics. What is your name and what do you do in general?
Yes, Prot. Hello. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Maxim. You can just call me Max if that's more comfortable. I am a university professor. I have a PhD in linguistics, technically speaking, philology. And, I've been using Emacs since probably like 2018. I actually had to track my private messages to see when it actually started. And I've stumbled upon your videos, obviously, mostly on org mode. I do pretty much I write for my job, for my personal projects. So that is why the interest in Emacs came in. But I use it as a non-programmer. I am a total noob in Emacs Lisp. Like even though I've been using it for 7 years, so that's probably my backstory of why I'm
Okay.
here.
Very interesting. So your use of Emacs is limited to org, or are there other things about it?
Uh, Pretty much org only. Whatever I do it in org. If it's like a blog post I want to publish, it's org. If it's a lecture preparation, it's org. Like any sort of like lesson plans are all done there. And whenever I have to like refer back to the lecture plans, I just use Orgsly on my like phone, and I can always backtrack. Obviously, I use like notebooks and stuff, like handwriting. But Emacs like does all the like text file management for me, and yeah, basically that's it. And all my like so-called Zettelkasten notes are also stored in Orgrom. I'm sorry to say that dnotes I haven't tried it yet because I've been using Orgrom for like 5 years, and I've watched a number of videos on dnote and it looks very promising. And the file naming system is incredible. I will try it on my second computer one day. I just don't have the time to get to it because the problem with Orgrom is obviously it's based on
Uh,
dependency. So I have a slight like fear that one day this will break or something, and that's why dnote probably would be a more sustainable option.
we had
So
a
yeah, I'll
small
take a look.
interruption there, and I lost the part of what org-rom has a dependency on. I think you said SQLite, right?
SQLite,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, sorry
yeah.
for the connection.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. The thing is that there is no reason to switch. Like, if something works, and this is my approach in general, if something works, don't change it. Like, there is no reason. And you wouldn't be gaining anything out of the note insofar as note taking is concerned. Like, maybe the file naming scheme is useful for other files that you want to keep track of, but the note taking part, it's the same everywhere.
It's all
So yeah,
text, yeah.
yeah. Plus, I don't think that org-rom is going anywhere. Like, I don't think there will be changes in the environment that make it obsolete or difficult to use. Like, I don't see that. It's hard for me to see that because the Emacs
Yeah,
community will always adapt. That's the good thing.
absolutely. That's why you gotta love Emacs.
Uh-huh. And do you do agenda as well with org?
Yes, thanks to your tutorials mostly. Yeah, there's like I have a huge like a very long like story of my productivity system, quote unquote. Because when I was in my like at the end of my bachelor's, start of my master's, I understood that I have a lot on my plate, and obviously I got into this absolute horrible rabbit hole of productivity tools, and I've been subscribed to so many YouTube channels on like, oh, this is a review of Todoist, oh, this is a review of TickTick, and there's like a new like cool fancy tool in town, and I've been using a bunch of them until I kind of understood that um, first of all they're primarily the same, and secondly they're mostly web versions, and like offline support is not very like good for most of these tools. So I had to find a solution, and obviously I knew about org agenda. I just knew it was kind of like difficult to find the right setup for me so that I can use it as if it were like a Todoist kind of like or some other like task management tool. And eventually, like little by little, I understood that like it was so transparent. I just put all my to-dos into one or two like org files. Everything worked as intended. And later on, like during summer, because I have like a huge teaching workload, I understood that I have tasks that are overdue for like 400 days. And I'm like, okay, I gotta solve this issue immediately. So I refurbished completely like my org agendas view, mostly using org super agenda because it allows you to like have separate blocks. Also from your tutorial, I got like the categories made in emojis, and it kind of like beautified the whole concept. But the thing is, and I find this very unusual, I've spent like a couple of months like actually like making this org agenda view perfect. And then when September hits and I have like a lot of classes, what I found out is that I don't use it very often. Like I just use my notebook and a pen anyways, because there's so many urgent tasks you don't even have time to get into your org agenda, into your org files, that you don't really even need it. And it's only necessary for like macro level task management for like projects and stuff, so that you don't lose track of them. So mostly I'm like, my path in this productivity system is like using a lot of tools, using just one tool, using no tools whatsoever. And maybe it's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah, because I think of what you said now is exactly what the trap is, which is like future proofing, which is, oh, I will have a system that will be perfect for my future needs. So you work in anticipation of what you might have. Eventually that happens, and then you're like, well, actually, I didn't need all that. And I think
Absolutely.
future proofing, when you take it to the extreme, ultimately detracts from your productivity.
Yeah, exactly that. And and this is like a capital T truth about productivity, like area at all. And everybody knows this, but nobody follows this piece of advice that don't switch tools, or like on Linux, don't switch distros. Like just stick to this for a year. It's gonna be fine. And you'll see that the tool becomes kind of transparent. It's either you don't even notice it working, or you understand that it's kind of like useless. You just got the concept of the tool, and that means that probably you don't even need it. Maybe there's like some other like not non-digital solution that will work for you. And you know, I guess you got to grow up and understand that this is kind of a trap of a sort.
Yeah. And of course, what you said now about understanding the concept of the tool, I think is key, because fundamentally, in order to work towards some goal, you need to have like, okay, what are my desirable outcomes? Like, what do I want to get out of this? And the tool can help you understand those better, but eventually the tool is not necessary for those to be formulated.
Precisely.
Yeah, the desiderata, as they say, like in the Latin word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. What are you teaching, by the way? So you made a distinction between linguistics and philology, which is interesting. And of course, I want you to tell me about that as well. But tell me first, what do you teach? Like, what is this about?
Okay, so
There are a lot of flies, by the way. Sorry.
yeah, I've
Like,
noticed. I've
yeah, of course, I
noticed.
have the window open and I try to be natural here, but this is not normal. Like, I don't know what.
All right.
Sorry.
Like, and what's the weather like? That's
Really
there.
warm. So, but this is not like I don't know. I don't know what has happened.
It's like an extra listener. Like, the phrase "to be a fly on the wall." Like, kind of that happens.
Okay, good.
Um,
Yeah, sorry to
in
interrupt.
terms, that's all right. In terms of teaching, the fly is more important than teaching, anyways. Like, I'm absolutely sure of that. Uh, I'm teaching linguistic students. So basically, it's for the first year. I teach introduction to specialty. I basically teach them the absolute basics of what kind of areas can linguistics bring you, and also I teach sociolinguistics, the connection between language and society. I teach a lot of English, obviously, and also I teach effective writing to master students. This is my basic skill set of what I can do and teach. The distinction between linguistics and philology is kind of interesting because in in the country where I live, and I live in Russia, if I like, maybe I'm completely wrong, but from what I know, we don't have PhD in linguistics. We don't have that kind of option. We have only PhD in philology, and I think the distinction is pretty important because in our university we have the distinction between those. So we have the separate department of philology and a separate department of linguistics, and there is a reason for that. I think that philologists, they, literally, if you look at the nomenclature, if you look at the name, people who love the word, and mostly they are interested in literary studies. So they like read a lot of, like, I guess, novels, fiction, all that stuff, and they study themes and character development and the historical context of these books and all that stuff. Linguistics is a more of a technical science. If you think about it, it can be theoretical and practical. Obviously, you can study grammars and language on different levels. You can study different things, really. Like, you can study sociolinguistics or psycholinguistics or cognitive linguistics. There are plenty of things to do inside of the field. But philology still, in our tradition, is kind of separated. And like, to be honest, we have very different traditions in that, for example, if you like enter a linguistics department, there's a huge, I would say, you're not welcome to study works of fiction, because it's not really our, not responsibility. It's not our area of interest. We can't say much about fiction. Like, for example, sometimes I see a lot of students, like young students, who will like come to me and they say, "Oh, I want to study, like, these books by I get Nabokov or so, like, some other writer," and I tell them, you probably want literary studies and philology. What we could be interested in is, for example, the interviews of Nabokov or lectures of Nabokov and like more nonfiction stuff. And if you want to know like how he was, building his speeches in like as a like a rhetorical figure, like like a person who like is a speaker, then yes, we would be interested in this. So that is the distinction, and it's a very primitive distinction, but that's how I see it. So that's why there is a disconnect that I have a PhD in philology, even though my kind of dissertation had nothing to do with fiction or literature.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thank you for explaining this. I'm curious, though. I didn't quite understand why fiction is something to be avoided in this regard, because I imagine, like, from a structural perspective, like from a linguist's eyes, fiction and non-fiction is about the substance rather than the structure. So why would that be important?
I have no idea. We just have the stereotype, I guess. It's a very like prejudicial thing, I would say. I don't know why that exists. We have kind of like, sometimes we have this like kind of inner conflict concerning this, and it's I really don't know. Is the right answer? I'm trying to catch the straw here of saying something interesting and intelligent. But in terms of structure, though, I would agree that there, like, linguists could study fiction, obviously. Like, for example, the most, like, the easiest example I can give is, obviously, if you look at literature of the modern, of postmodern and metamodern literature, right? If we study it like this and we think about how the concept of a novel changed, why not a linguist? Why not a philologist? I think both of these specialists can talk about it. But when it comes to more like stylistic devices and symbols and I don't know, like I've been to a conference recently, and there were a bunch of linguists who were talking about like movies, and they like said, "Oh, when in a movie there's this episode where the rain comes, and that means that water is a metaphor for something else." I look at this and say, is this actually linguistics? Or is this actually cultural studies? Is it cinema discourse studies? Is it philology? And basically, the thing is, the lines are so blurred that you have no idea what it is. And usually, if the lines are blurred, you just use a fancy word like how do you call it, interdisciplinary studies, and then it all works fine. You can be anybody you want.
Exactly, exactly. You straddle all these divides and you're good.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, what is it like to teach this subject, though? Like, or let me put it a little bit differently. Why would someone come to you for this kind of study? Like, what are they trying to achieve?
Oh boy, this is getting into sad territory. Um, well, the truth of the matter is, when our students enter the Department of Linguistics, they mostly do it because they want to study languages. And I mean, who can blame them? We have a great department with native speakers and a bunch of languages all on offer, and that's basically the selling point of the department.
Hmm.
And the problem, though, is the attitude of students towards other subjects apart from languages is questionable. Sometimes they basically think, I came here to study languages, foreign languages, and that's a totally noble pursuit. It's not an easy thing to do. They study up to 3 languages in 4 years, and they have some sort of English from school, obviously, but they study the second language from zero, and then the third language is like an additional one. And I know it's all complicated, but there are other disciplines to think about, because when you get in an academic degree, that means that you have to do much more than just languages. And the thing is, it's very difficult to keep them engaged in classes apart from languages, and that is where like kind of the conflict starts. And I cannot blame them, because when I was a student, I did the same thing. The only thing I was good at school was languages.
Mm.
I was a straight A student, but I knew that languages is the best, like is the easiest route for me. And only after like I graduated with my bachelor's, I understood that, first of all, the foreign languages, no matter how like cognitively good it is to study them, people who study multiple languages, there's this, very well-known fact that people who are like bilingual have Alzheimer's developed 5 years later than the monolinguals and all that stuff. Despite all of that, I should say that the life around me kind of showed me, well, I know English, and I'm really privileged to know English, because right now I'm able to talk to you, for example, right? But for example, I was studying Spanish, Swedish, French, German. I don't remember much of some of them. And what I found out is these languages I haven't found use like in real life. And because of that, I kind of doubt the necessity of it. And I basically understood that if I'm staying in my country, if I contribute to the economy of my country, then probably it's a good idea to know my native language better. And this is where I think modern education kind of fails at times, because it doesn't really pay much attention to the native language, because everybody kind of automatically assumes that if you are a native, you know how to read and write in that language. And this couldn't be far from truth when you actually look at university classes and when people graduate, what their like reading and writing competencies are. So I understood that, at the end of my bachelor's, and this is something I try to tell my students, and some of them listen, some of them don't. um, they say, I'm here to study Spanish or Korean or Chinese or whatever, and again, totally fine by me. But it's highly likely that they will stay in the country, and they have to function as a citizen here. And if you can't write an email well, then there is kind of a problem. So that's the kind of little tension that I have. And the tension between languages, and the tension between languages and other disciplines that could be interesting and could be rewarding to study, but students usually like neglect them. So it's very easy to complain about students here, but I'm just talking about the general mass. Obviously there are some bright students who understand everything, like they absorb everything, and I'm just talking about mass education here.
Hmm. But I think what you said about the local tongue considered a given. I think this is something that I have seen also in my country, like with the Greek speakers, for example, where they use increasingly more English/American phrases. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Like TV is all American export or British exports, and gaming, it's all, of course, we know what it is. So, of course, in practice, there will be a lot of phrases and a lot of expressions that they get from there. And you cannot assume that they just know the language, because ultimately that is what they use every day with each other. Of course, there's nothing wrong in that, but eventually that creates problems down the line, for sure. Once you get into the more intellectual activities, the more those pursuits.
Absolutely. And yes, this is not only, this is a global issue. Like, in the past year, there have been so many, mostly like, cool publications, like The Atlantic, for example, who are beating the drum about, like English, like American students not being able to read a novel per semester, like even philology students, and everybody is like very much shocked by the way that people treat like texts in general these days. And again, I told you that I'm teaching effective writing to the master students, and this is where I find the most issues, because these are already grown-up people who have been in this formal education system for a long time. So in our country, it's 11 years of school, 4 years of bachelor's, and here they are on the 17th year of studying, and they have no idea how to build a clear sentence in their native language. And they're linguists. I'm not talking about other disciplines. And this is kind of concerning. And you said that correctly that this is a given. I would even show you proof, because I'm doing this project now and on effective writing, and what I found is this: the World Economic Forum, which I sometimes read reports of, wonderful graphs they present wonderful data, and they show basically every single year, maybe like once every 2 years, they show the list of skills that employers look for in like candidates for their job positions. And what happens is that if you look at this list, I don't remember how many, like there are like over 20, almost 30 skills they're listed. And right now they list reading and writing and mathematics as the 21st most important skill out of them all.
21st.
And I get, yes, it's
Out
position number 21. Out of like 30 something maybe.
Okay.
And I look at this list and I go and say, well, yes, because it's kind of obvious, isn't it? Like if a person has a degree, if a person like had like any sort of formal education, they are good readers and writers. But the thing is, and I think it's, I always give this example from the book by Mortimer Adler, How to Read a Book. It's a meta book. And inside there is like a reference to like some paper, some research, and maybe it's not even accurate, but I kind of agree with the premise, where it says that the reading skill in children is like rising throughout their primary education. They learn how to read. They go to more complex texts and they understand them. But then they say that during the 6th or 7th grade, the level kind of stagnates. And for some people, it doesn't change for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
So because, and I think there's a reason for this. I do not know how your school experience was, but for me it was like this. If we had subjects with complex concepts like biology, geography, or history, what we used to do is we had to read a textbook, learn by heart a paragraph from the textbook, and then retell it in class. But when you're a 6th or 7th grader, most of these things and most of these texts are not written in the language that you are supposed to understand. And you're kind of grasping at all the words you can possibly remember. And that creates a very ineffective reading strategy. And this strategy, and if nobody works on this, that means that in university, you're going to have the same issue. And after you graduate, you're going to have the same issue.
Wow.
So I don't know, has it been like this, in education and Europe?
Yeah.
Is it?
It's exactly that. Basically, you practice the skill of memorizing texts and recalling them verbatim, but without actually being able to construct such a text yourself out of nothing. In other words, you don't understand it. You could have a parrot do it, but the parrot isn't a biologist, of course, or whatever.
Yes. There is no explicit instruction on how to do that.
I am very interested now to understand better what you mean by effective writing. So, of course, the word kind of explains it, but I think there is more to it. So, tell me a little bit about that. Effective in what sense?
If only I knew. Like, I don't, like, obviously the subject was developed by, like, the program, and I was given to do this discipline. Like, okay, by effective writing, I mostly base my projects on the ideas that I've heard from, very surprisingly, from Steven Pinker, because he has made an interesting speech maybe like 10 years ago about the style and linguistics in the 21st century. And he was talking about his book Sense of Style, where he was talking about so-called classical style, where basically what it entails is that a writer treats his reader as almost like his equal, and he uses colloquial language to talk about, like, and by colloquial I don't mean like slang and jargon. It's actually the opposite. That avoiding jargon, avoiding like legalese and academies, like these things when you feel like you're writing something smart, but for the reader these words are very empty and make no sense. So effective writing is literally the opposite of that. So what I'm trying to do is, when I have my master's degree students, they are probably people who are already specializing into something very narrow, and they are already kind of plagued by what Steven Pinker calls the curse of knowledge. When they know something, but they have no idea what it is not to know it. Basically, they cannot put themselves in the shoes of a non-expert, of a person who doesn't know it. And when they start doing that, when they are cursed by this knowledge, they have no idea how to talk about it apart from using the jargon. And if they use jargon, it's not clear, it's not effective. So basically, we are trying to get rid of curse of knowledge, and we are trying to write clearly and concisely. But the thing is, nobody again knows what clear writing is, like what it is to write clearly. And this is the concept we're trying to unravel. And again, it's not my developments. I'm not a particular genius, but there are two things we know about clear writing. The first one is obviously clear writing is when you write something and the other person understands it from the first read, right? It makes a lot of sense. But you as a writer cannot test that, because especially like in the age of internet, like you post something on social media, what is the chance that people actually understood what you wrote or read what you wrote? So there's this issue that you cannot put yourself in the shoes of the reader, especially when you do not know your audience. Obviously, when you're writing an email, it's a bit different. But especially in the era of the internet, you have no idea what your audience is. So the second way to think about clear writing is this, and I took this from William Zinsser, an American journalist, a writer, and he wrote like a couple of books on writing. And he says this: clear writing is basically writing simple declarative sentences. Each sentence has to have a noun and a verb. Mm-hmm. And you just put them one after the other in a logical manner, and that's it. You got it clear writing. I'm not going to say that you only write in declarative sentences that are simple, but just whenever you add complexity, what starts to happen is that there's a higher chance for misunderstanding. Later on, you can work with the text and make it better and flow better and stuff like that. So this is what I guess I mean by effective writing. I have no idea how to teach the subject. Many people are saying that you cannot teach writing. The only way people learn writing is by writing. Mm-hmm. So we try to do that.
But already telling them, like, do it this way is already some kind of a model to work towards. I want to add something to this curse of knowledge that you mentioned, which is what I experienced, and maybe there is research on that and maybe others are aware of it, but what I experienced also, it's not just that I have a very particular way of saying something because that's the only way I learned about it, but also that I feel the need to elaborate on it just to be clear that I know about it. So, for example, let's say I will say something that, in Emacs I have a package that I develop. And I will put in parentheses like a big statement where I explain, well, Emacs is an extensible text editor, blah, 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 blah. A package is blah, 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 and we use blah, 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 such and such and such. And then, of course, you are now off topic, right? And of course, I think good lighting is also to know when to not go down those tangents, maybe.
Yeah, I know the pain. No, I would say that like why also people love you and your contributions to the open source and Emacs world is because your documentation is like absolutely like transparent. Everybody understands what you have to communicate, and I guess that also I should say that probably comes with your like experience of writing in your blog, because like it's not only the videos you make. Like, do you feel like there's like a benefit of actually typing out your thoughts in your blog?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And actually, that was the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is like clear writing, I think, is in practice indistinguishable from clear thinking. Because if you can write, if you can spell out exactly what you think, you already know exactly what you think. If you cannot spell it out, it's not clear in your head either. I think,
Yes.
for me at least. So I find that when I write, ultimately I do it for myself because I write to elucidate, to clarify what is in my head, to put it out there, and now to have it like 3D, as it were, and be able to see it from all sides.
Absolutely. So in terms of like the curse of knowledge and stuff, some people do not even know that they have that curse, and this is where they get tangled in jargon and terminology that other people do not understand. But whenever you try like to go overboard and you try to over explain things, yeah, that can also happen. And I have no idea where the line is. The only thing I will say is that there is this thing, and I know it's again conceptual, that in communication there are like these things called maxims, which is very funny because it's my name. And H.P. Grice, Herbert Paul Grice, he like had like this list of 4 maxims of communication that you have to follow if you want to be like a good communicator. And one of the maxims is a maxim of quantity, which says that when you talk or you write, you don't say too little and you don't say too much. And this is absolutely true, because whenever you say too little or too much, the person kind of tries to understand why. Why did that person give me so little information? When you ask, how are you? And somebody says fine, you're like, okay, the maximum of quantity was kind of like broken here. So that means that, okay, violated. So it means that the person is actually not fine. Or the opposite, when the person talks too much and you already regret asking the question. That can happen. So obviously you as a writer has to and again, it's impossible to do, psychologically, it's impossible to put yourself in the shoes of a reader. You can reread as much as you want, but you just gotta assume the baseline, who's my average reader, and do they really need to know what Emacs is, or when they open this page they already they already know this. There's some sort of a how do you call it, this linguistic term which I forgot.
There's the
presupposition. Presupposition, it's called. I presuppose that the person already knows about Emacs, so I don't have to write about it anymore. So there's this line, I guess. And yes, you're right. Writing is thinking. I know it's a very trite thing to say, and nobody likes to hear it. But one of the reasons why people are afraid of writing is because they think they are testing their thinking, and they know that it's not ideal. And they are afraid if somebody is going to read the text and see how bad it is, that means that I'm not only a bad writer, I'm also a bad thinker.
Correct. And so ultimately it takes courage to actually write your thoughts, because it's like telling the world, hey, here are my thoughts, these are the gaps, attack.
Yes.
Depending, of course, on the subject. But basically, you expose yourself to vectors of attack. Criticism.
Yep. And I know it all too well because, I'm not teaching effective writing just because. For the past 10 years, I've been actively blogging. I have a couple of blogs. And I've basically learned these mistakes. and I faced the criticism very often because I picked like literally one of the worst things to write about in 2015. I was a huge music fan. I decided to write about music, and I listened to new albums, and I wrote reviews on those albums. And
Hmm.
critics and reviewers are usually not met very well in on the internet and by fans. And besides, I have no like music education. I'm just a listener. It's all just my opinion. And I remember I was writing these texts, and I look at them like earlier on, and they are horrible. They're not only are they ineffective, but that's understandable. I was very young, but also I was hiding my incompetence in like flowery language, in like
Hmm.
expressive words and all that stuff, like how beautiful or how horrible that track is. For example, that song is like talking about these issues and about those issues, and I found out this the hard way because I faced a lot of criticism that I'm not like actually an expert in this topic, and they were right. The worst thing is they were right, and I was just an imposter, all this time. And obviously, because of this criticism, you know, I worked hard and I understood like what my job kind of entails. I was doing it like for free, for nothing. Like I was doing it because I was interested. And I've learned a lot because during that time, like I understood, okay, if I talk about an artist, I should probably do thorough research about the artist, about their life, about their life's work, all that stuff. Because if I'm not, why am I writing about them in the first place? I'm just taking one album out of the discography and crushing it to pieces. For what? For what really? And there has been there has been a lot of positive changes in my writing because of that. First of all, better research. Secondly, one of like very professional journalists actually stumbled upon my writing, and I asked him for feedback, and he basically told me the same thing, that I am a good expressive writer, but nobody is interested in what I have to say. So I had to like make sure that the readers could benefit from reading the text. And the third thing which I found out, which is like again, if any of you viewers, I guess if your viewers think about like writing or not, like because I have people, I have students who are like, I've always wanted to start a blog, but I was always afraid.
Hmm.
Or even worse, I've always wanted to start a diary or a journal, but I like buy this notebook and it's so empty and beautiful, and I don't want to write in it because I am afraid I'm going to spoil it. And there is one very good case in my music writing, which happens a lot. So for if take I listen to an album and I don't like it. It's like not very good. And I give it a 4 out of 10. I listen to it for the first time and I give a score 4 out of 10. And then I start researching the artist. I start researching the lyrics and I re-listen to the album. And then when I finish typing my text, I give it a 7 out of 10. My perception of the album changes just because I kind of work with it and I learn more about the context. And this process makes the subject of my writing way more enjoyable and engaging. And I found myself thinking that, oh, wow, writing has this extra side effect that you actually enjoy what you're writing. You're spending time with the material, and that's so wonderful. And wherever people are afraid of writing or they think about it, don't think, go write. It's the best tool out there.
Yeah, yeah, and because you mentioned like when you journal, I think it's the same. It has the same effect, even if you don't publish it. Blogging is just journaling on hard mode if you do it consistently and if there is this potential for criticism. Just to say, of course, criticism, it has this negative connotation where it's like, oh, I don't mean to criticize, but I criticize. Criticism is not bad. Criticism is basically a way to help you get better. Because it points out the parts of you, the inefficiencies or the inadequacies of you that you can improve on. And if you heed the criticism, then it's something constructive. I have
Yes.
talked with a lot of people who have told me, like, oh, I have hesitation writing. And I think fundamentally the problem is that you identify, or rather, you hold dear to your current state. So it's like, I don't want to criticize, to be criticized for who I am. When if you create distance and you're like, well, I can become somebody else. So who I am is just an avatar of my current state of knowledge and ability. And of course, let people attack the avatar. I will grow out of it. through writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So very effective tool, and I know criticism is like a harsh word in general, and it has like the semantics of this word grew like incredibly. Like whenever everybody says crit, and everybody's like starts shaking all of a sudden. Like like there are people who think that critical thinking, right, like as a skill, is the skill of criticizing ideas, which is not really the case. And um, but actually, there's nothing bad behind this word. And obviously, you can find your trolls and like some very hateful people online. But what can you do? What can you do? Like everybody can type. But if you're an effective writer, you don't really care, about this like unconstructive criticism.
Yeah, and then there is also something else. Me, I used to be annoyed by trolls a very long time ago, but nowadays I actually see their utility, which is a test to see if you take your projected self through your writings too seriously. And what I mean by this is like, well, if I am disturbed by some words of some random person online, I'm not standing on very stable ground to begin with.
Actually, a very good like litmus paper for thinking about that. That's a very interesting change in mentality. Yeah. I will take this concept. I will steal it.
And just to elaborate, yeah, of course, steal it, no problem. Just to elaborate on what I mean by this is that as a writer, the way I feel about it is that my writings are an expression of me, but not me. And me, via writing through this medium, I become a different person. I am in the process of becoming continuously. Basically, I recreate, regenerate, or expand or enlarge myself. And so my writings, in a sense, are snapshots of my previous self. So attacking those in the context of criticism, well, it's the old guy.
Yeah, actually that's true. Like there is that's going to be an unusual shout out. Maybe people like your subscribers do not know this YouTuber, but one of my favorite YouTubers to whom I owe like good English is his name is Northern Lion on YouTube. And he's just a Canadian YouTuber who does Let's Plays and streams video games and how he plays them. A very intellectual guy. And he had this very funny quote one day, and I will probably butcher it. It was like, at any point in time, you are just a dumber version of yourself. Because really, you grow up with every single time. You know what they say about habits, like that personality changes with habits. If you exercise a habit, you become a different person. And same thing even goes to writing, right? Like, for example, you come back home tired after work or study, and you are like, you have a choice: should I journal today or not?
Mm-hmm.
If you do not journal, well, that's you stay the same. If you journaled, if you wrote something down, you're already a better version of yourself that hasn't journaled. And I think this kind of little change can you can basically say that the person who wrote is better the person who hasn't. But what's interesting, the person who wrote is already like kind of dumber, so to say, than I am right now, because I'm becoming and growing. It's all a process. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And then there is another thing which is specific to journaling, or the equivalent, which is blogging regularly. Of course, journaling here, I mean daily or frequently, okay? Which is consistency. And consistency in this context means that I will do it through thick and thin, as they say. Like, sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I'm really feeling it, but no matter what, I will commit to it. And maybe it won't be a magnum opus every time, but because I go through the rigors, exactly, I remain on top of things and I sharpen that skill.
Yes. Consistency, no matter how much people talk about it, is always underrated. Like, everybody says you got to be consistent in whatever you do, like in a skill you develop, in a habit you want to exercise. But it's just that and I've written to you in the email that I'm in the process, a 2-year process of reading Aristotle's Ethics, and how he says about, like, in one book about indulgence and temperance, and how he says that sometimes people know the right thing to do, but they don't do it, and this is like the core tension of the book that I'm trying to solve for myself, because I am that way. For example, when I have to do research, I actually do not, I'm not excited about research. No, it's not the right way. I'm not excited about starting doing research. Like just starting, it's horrible, because you come into the research with a lot of uncertainty, and obviously everything in your body is against the uncertainty, and because of that, you kind of, even though you do know that consistency is good and you have to work at it, every single day, even when you don't feel like it, you allow yourself not to do it. Well, again, it works for me. Like, like the word that he uses, I'm gonna butcher the Greek, but like akrasia or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I'm not sure right now.
It's basically means that it basically means a type of indulgence when you know what's right and good for you, but you don't do it.
If you show me how it's written, then I could say. But don't worry about
it. Not now. That's all right. That's all right. So he says like 3 types of like indulgence, and one of them is this one. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, that's interesting. Which is something we also observe out there. Like, you have all the doctors say that smoking is bad for you, for example, and you're like, oh yeah, I know, and you're smoking, for example.
Absolutely.
So of course we do know this. We do have this dissonance cognitively. It's very common. I think what changes is when you make it second nature, which is like when you are doing something habitually through thick and thin, is when eventually you do it frictionlessly, you do it effortlessly. It's like, oh, this just happens. I'm not even trying. And I think this also applies more generally to discipline. When we say consistency, it's another way of saying, well, you are disciplined about it, which is like, in the beginning, you have to struggle to be disciplined. Eventually, you don't struggle at all. It's just how you are. Like, that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm not a huge philosopher, and I know almost nothing about philosophy. But I think it's David Hume who said that a person is nothing but a set of habits, and I think this rings true to this day. Whatever you practice is who you are. Whatever you eat is who you are. What kind of friends you have is who you are, and all that stuff.
Yeah. But of course, now that you mentioned philosophy generally, I think, of course, you could study philosophy proper and now you are a philosopher, but I think there are many ways to go about it. Like, if you study philology, you mentioned philology earlier. Well, you are not just studying a text, you are studying the history of the text. You are studying the culture in which the text is made possible. So the web of time, in other words, that frames the text. So the text now is a function of the place and the space and, of course, the prevailing conditions therein. So you are studying those as well, and it goes on. So in another word, studying a work of literature is studying the human condition from a certain angle.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, that's why people say read fiction, and I know there's a lot of people who want to be like effective managers and entrepreneurs, and whoever say, look, I gotta read like 30 books a year, and they all say it's nonfiction because fiction just kind of eats away my time and it's not very beneficial. That's nonsense, really, because just reading fiction, even little, if you take some very influential books, obviously you will philosophize about them. There's no other way about it. It's not just a plot and a bunch of characters thrown into one story. There's much more to that, and that's why reading is reading fiction is I know it's very primitive to say, but it's important. It's just the worst part about it, like I'm talking to you about reading and writing.
Oh, one second, we have the interruption. The internet.
Workload does not.
Sorry. We have the interruption. So Uh, let's see.
Yeah, that's all
So,
right.
so you are saying I'm talking to you and the rest I lost.
Okay. I'm talking to you about reading and writing, but the thing is, I myself, because of my workload at university, I don't really read or write that often.
Mhm.
Like, I have almost no time for blogging and very little time for reading, and that is what makes me like sad sometimes, and kind of a hypocrite when I like talk to my students and I tell them all these like morally important stuff, and I myself don't practice them, and I actually feel like kind of sad about it. But you know. You're absolutely right in that. Uh, just I can pinpoint the time in my life when I journaled or read a lot, because it has like some very unknown and kind of like unnoticeable changes into my mentality in my life. I cannot even like really say what they are. Just it's this spiritual kind of like nourishment that you get through these experiences is maybe like not practically noticeable, but it is a huge change. And yes, a part of this is philosophizing and thinking about lives of other people, even if they're hypothetical. Philosophy is also hypothetical. Let's imagine a situation in which a person does X, and what does this lead to? It's not only just literature for the sake of words, it's also for the sake of ideas that are inside.
Yeah, and I think the common thread in anything that relates to the human condition is, well, how well do you know humans? Like whether we talk about philosophy or literature or religion for that matter, how well does it describe a human experience? I was reading recently, I have been reading a few short novels. So Anton Chekhov, how do you pronounce it, by the way?
It's you pronounce it correctly with h, Chekhov, but
Yeah.
everybody pronounces his Chekhov. That's not a
Okay,
problem.
okay. So Anton Chekhov. Okay, that's good. And for
Perfect.
example, I don't know the original title, but it's The Lady with the Dog, the story that unfolds in
Yes,
Yalta.
that one. Yeah.
And basically, Chekhov has a story where there is no happy ending. It's not like, and they lived happily ever after, goodbye. Uh, and of course, you can think of this as, what is this quality which is indeterminate? Why is it messy? Why is it complicated? Why isn't though happy ending or resolution in the conventional sense? What should we be thinking about here? And of course, all the characters in the specific circumstances they are in. And I think just asking those questions already makes you think about that specific plot, that specific story, but about all such stories where there is no clean solution or happy ending or a clear resolution, neat and tidy, and off we go.
Y- Absolutely. With oh man, with reading, like I don't want to shame people in like choosing the wrong literature, but I've been and like whatever suits you, you read. Like when I was on
Again, we have the internet issue. Let's.
reading journals.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry,
sorry.
sorry.
Okay, you're back. You're
Yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah.
Wonderful.
So I'm back. You're back, brother. You were
Yes.
saying I'm not shaming people for
Yeah, I'm not
choosing it.
shaming anybody for choosing literature because it's I also started with like some very like typical fiction like Stephen King and all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, but people are so afraid of thinking about the human condition sometimes. Is like I went to a bookstore one day and there was this woman who was very confused. She wanted a recommendation. She got to the shop assistant. She's like I like these books. Can you please suggest that I read something else? And he gave her a couple of books, and she takes this one. Oh no, it's about murder. I hate murder, and and she puts it down on the shelf. Oh, people are divorced here. Like what is this? I don't want to read about divorce. And again, it's totally normal because reading for some people can be a way of escape
Mhm.
and refuge from the like horrible things that they experience in their life. Totally fine by me. But many people are stuck in this kind of view that I have to only have stories that have happy endings. That's and also that have uh, close endings, like, not open endings where you have no idea, like you're left to interpretation. Some people hate movies and stories that end, on an open ending, and that's because, again, the brain is afraid of uncertainty. I want the creator to tell me exactly what happened, and in an ideal world, it should be like a good ending as well. But when and I think this is also very interesting in that, like, there's another maxim that is broken here, because when you read a story, you think of it in the fairy tale kind of discourse that it's going to end well, but then when it doesn't end well, you are forced to think, okay, the writer like kind of subverted my expectations. Why did the author do this? And it like the author wanted you to think about what happens if something goes wrong, and that's the wonderful, like, benefit of literature, I guess.
Exactly. And then ultimately, by reading a story, you are given the impetus to think about something that maybe you wouldn't have the chance to experience in your everyday life. Like, to use this same example, of course, it's not the only story, but to use the same example of the story I mentioned, it's like,
Yeah.
where I am, it's very unlikely that I will witness the same kind of dynamic playing out. So, of course, just sitting here, it's hard for me to think about, well, what would it be like if such and such were the case, right? Whereas now, through the story, I am given the material to think about something. And I think the more material you have and the more you can reflect on it, ultimately it expands your horizons.
Yes. And again, I'm not a cognitive scientist, but there was this article I read where they said that dreams fulfill the same function. Like when we sleep and we dream,
Oh,
it's the
tell me
same
more.
thing. So there is this again. So I actually can refer to this article. It's called "Enter the Supersensorium." It's by Eric Hoel, Hoel, and I really like this article, like this essay. It's basically about the fact that it starts very well. It starts that there is a competition between Netflix and their main competitor, which is surprisingly sleep. Because, for example, it's 2 a.m. and the person is like kind of dozing off but doesn't want to fall asleep, and there's like this, in this episode ended on a very interesting note, so I have to continue watching, or do I go to bed? And sometimes Netflix wins, sometimes sleep wins. And the author of this article kind of pushes this idea that if people get deprived of dreams, actually it started with the experiment on rats. When rats entered the REM stage of the sleep, when they start seeing dreams, and if you kind of wake them up, basically they start to be like to jaundice, they become yellow, and eventually they die. So depriving living things of sleep is actually detrimental, not just sleeping but of dreaming. That's important. And human beings, we also dream, and there's, I guess, this idea that the reason we dream and we have nightmares is because the nightmares help us experience things we are afraid to see in real life, and they are very improbable. Being struck by lightning, falling off a cliff, or something like this. But our brain kind of trains on this material. Like, it creates the story for itself, the hypothetical story, so that it knows how to behave in the situation, what's the emotions it experiences during this. It's kind of called like, and in dreams and in stories, we kind of build this, it's called experiential world line. Like, every single experience in your consciousness is there, and it can be in the form of real events, fictional events, or dreaming. And the reason why dreams are important is also this. And also Netflix, again, is a competitor here because it literally creates these fictional stories for you, and you decide like whether to watch it or not. So yes, absolutely, these hypotheticals are kind of not even like, it's not only entertaining, but probably it's even vital for the brain to be fed with these stories.
Oh, amazing. This is so interesting. I have had that theory, but of course, I haven't thought it as much as those researchers, which is along those lines. Like, the dreams effectively are a lab where I can run tests about states of affairs that do not actually put me in trouble. So it's from a safe point that I do it. It's simulations, basically. I run simulations and see what will work and what will not work and have capacities for them. But yeah, this, of course, puts it in perspective. I don't know that depriving an animal, a rat in this case, of dreaming is actually deadly. It's actually lethal. That's amazing.
Yeah, according to that article. But yes, I like the analogy with the simulation. It is a simulation of some sort.
Yeah, and of course the same is true for theorizing in general, and the thought experiment, we say, and fantasy and all that. Like, we do it to ultimately prepare for something that might happen, even if it never happens. But we prepare in the here and now, not in that eventuality. So we are ready now, not then. We grow now in that sense.
Yes, and we build that experiential world line, whatever that means in cognitive science. Like that.
Of course, now I'm interested. The kind of student that you have, I don't know if there is an average kind of student, but let's imagine there is an average kind of student. Like, what are their interests? Are they into cinema, into books, into gaming, into a little bit of everything, into nothing at all other than foreign languages, as you were telling me? Like, how is that like? What is it to have these students?
It's a difficult question, and I'm also feeling under pressure because there's a very highly likely that they are gonna watch this. So
of course we can change. They are great people.
No,
Yeah.
no. They are no. I sometimes I tell it to their face, so that's all right.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I will answer in abstract, and then I'll get to more specific. So in abstract, there is this issue that we call mass education, mass education, obviously, just statistically speaking and mathematically speaking, the more students there are, the less intelligent they are. That makes like statistical sense, because obviously when we think about elite universities or colleges or schools, whatever, what happens is that they usually a very limited elite, and in that, to get into that elite, there's huge competition, or people with certain privileges enter these institutions, and obviously it's kind of an exclusive club full of like smart or rich kids. Right now, this is not the case, obviously. I don't even know if that's the right term, but democratization of education, where obviously it's kind of expensive, but there are state-funded spots and places where you can study for free in our country. At least that is a possibility. For some departments, the government kind of gives these spots for incredibly smart students who did their final exams well and so on. But this is just a very long way of saying that there are more students now. It's more accessible, and if the family has the money to afford the education, they will go there. And basically, I know this because when I was a student of linguistics, we had like 76 people in our department, 76 per year. Last year we had 180, and the whenever you go to a class with 180 students, where you have to carry the message across to all of these people, when you have to grade their papers in such quantities, you kind of understand that the level of education falls off sharply, because obviously the smaller the group, the better the education process is. But when it's so massive, that's where the problem becomes. And there is this again, probably it's a very well-known analogy, but it's like they say that the caravan is as small as its slowest camel. Basically, that means that if among these 180 students there is one who doesn't understand, you have to descend to their level of understanding. But that kind of makes the overall process kind of slower, and the students who already understood there is a problem there. For them, they lose a lot in this process. So that's where I want to look at the word average. So when we look at average, I don't know. There, normal people, normal kids, and they're not even kids anymore. They're kind of like grown-ups, but in our eyes, it's not always grown-ups. Um, I should say that there are two main factors, obviously, here that affect how they behave and what they like. And the first one, I think, is COVID. They People are saying a lot about the effects of the pandemic on education and on economics and all that stuff. And it's it's very, again, it's something you cannot put into words, but there is this issue that we are probably getting more isolated because of that. And even the education process, if they had distance learning, when they had to, like, just like you and me right now, to have like classes in these like video conferencing rooms, it's not the same as being in the same classroom, obviously, and that kind of affects the way they engage in the classrooms. And sometimes they can be slow, and sometimes they, because obviously when you're at home in the comfort of your bed or your table, it's one thing, but when you are put to the test right here, right now, among other people, and you cannot pretend that your microphone is not working, that it puts you under pressure, and many of these people are kind of scared, and that's understandable. And the second thing that I think affects them is obviously the absolute like rapid internet right now that is like happening. And what's interesting here, it's good and bad at the same time. Because usually people say, oh, TikTok, it's so like horrible and stuff, and I kind of like subscribe to that. But there's something good about it, because if scientists like interdisciplinarity, how like when you understand psychology and linguistics, you're like a better specialist. I think modern students are also well versed in popular culture. So it's not only music or it's not only movies, it's kind of everything at the same time, because like this brain rot TikToks, actually what happens is they kind of process like data from very different fields. Like they watch a video that was popular in 2011 and they laugh, and then they see a reference to like the Barbie movie and like whatever, and you see it and you're like, okay, they are their brains are working very interestingly. They find these unusual connections in edits which I would have never thought of. But the problem is obviously because this fragmented thinking kind of is a problem when you want to give them like a monolithic text, for example, and read it, because it doesn't have references sometimes. It's not very flashy, and that's where they get lost, and that's understandable. So we kind of try to face that challenge and try to teach them how to maneuver in this kind of boring academic field, so that there is an issue. And in terms of their interests, plenty of interests. And if you take Russian teenagers right now, I would say that there is a huge rise in the love for the Japanese and the Korean culture. Everybody, like, for example, you go to a bookstore, there must be a section with manga, and it has to be like 30 square meters, if not bigger.
Wow.
It's yeah, no, I'm exaggerating here, but there's a lot of fans of anime and manga right now. And the Korean culture has entered the scene with Korean pop, obviously. We have a lot of students who want to study Korean and Japanese just because of the cultural effect they have on what they consume. And that's an interesting part. But the problem is, I'm a person who is not at all interested in those things, so sometimes I cannot find the common ground. I'm well versed in popular culture, like the American, the Western pop culture, more or less. And even here, I'm already like lost. It's very difficult to be up to date with the teenagers and students these days. You want to stay topical, but you just can't. It's impossible. And even like my music blog, which kind of helps me, like it's a lifesaver. When I make a music reference that they understand, they feel like I'm a god or something. But even this kind of falls off sharply, because the music I listen to and they listen to is very different. Like back in the day when I made a Taylor Swift reference, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, everybody, oh my God, he knows Taylor Swift. When I make the same reference, like right now, it's just like, what is this grandpa trying to tell me? It's kind of that. And the other interesting sharp difference that I've noticed is that students do not watch movies anymore, like full-length motion picture movies. What they do is they watch TV shows. This is more comfortable for them. And they say it takes less time, which is kind of a paradox because to me it's the opposite. I'd rather watch a movie for 2 hours than to watch like 5 seasons of with like 10 episodes and stuff like that. It actually, technically speaking, cumulatively, it like you spend more time on the show. But to them, it makes more sense, and that's why, like, whenever I tell them what was the last movie you watched, they kind of find it hard to answer. And again, COVID here also is kind of a an intervention here because during COVID, cinema theaters were closed, and people again watched movies from home. And because we don't have this kind of instant habit to go to the cinema theaters again, I think TV shows are way more comfortable, to watch in the again comfort of your home. So I think this is a very long way to answer like what I see in students these days.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, that's insightful. Yeah, thank you. But I think the common thread here is comfort. It's also what you ended on, which is that, well, it's what they were used to and it's what they are doing, but for them, it's also the easy thing to do, and they don't want to get out of that. What I'm interested, though, is does the university setting, the exposure to this different world actually now, does it break them out of that comfort zone? Does it incentivize them to broaden it or to explore ways of doing things that they weren't used to before?
I would love that, but
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it's very difficult to get them out of the shell. Again, the problem here is again mass education strikes again because again, if there are too many people in the classroom, you can't possibly have an individual approach to each one of them and to make everyone talk. Impossible. Obviously, I'm not always teaching to 180. I'm teaching to like 20 students sometimes, but even that is a challenge. Now there are some people who just want to be in the comfort of their like dome that they covered themselves with. They're just very happy in their like happy space. They're just doing exercises and they don't want to be bothered by the professor or by fellow students. And no, I wouldn't say that our university incentivizes that. And that's a bad thing. I should probably do that. I should probably like give them more engaging exercises and tasks that would make them work. But even when I do like this thing called mingling, it's when for example, they worked in one group and then like 5 minutes later they change the groups. There are some people who are just not willing to stand up and to go to another group. Like maybe they are just antisocial or whatnot. It's all right. I do understand we're all different and we all have our different insecurities and prejudice towards other people and all that. But sometimes I just can't make them to get out of their shell. And again, that's totally normal because among these people there are some bright students as well, and you'd rather not. You just rather let them stay and do their thing, and be with their interests for a while. But you know what's more sad about it? Let's imagine a hypothetical teenager who likes manga, for example, and is really into manga. And during the classes, they don't listen. They doodle something on the margins. When you ask them about their interests, when you ask them like about what are you drawing or what are you reading recently, they're afraid to speak up. They're kind of ashamed of their interest because they think they might be laughed at for that. So they do not change the interest, but they are afraid of talking about them. And this is a very childish thing to do, really, because who really cares what other people think, right? If you like manga, you might be an expert like in it more than anybody else, and you should be proud of it, but many of them aren't. But it's just age, obviously they're gonna grow up and it's different because like even in my university setting, the first 2 years of bachelors and the last 2 years of bachelors are two very different kinds of people. So something clicks in them at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I want to connect to also what you said earlier about knowing your native tongue and how you can be useful in society outside the context of the academia, right? And I think now with this regard, which is like, of course, those students will actually be out there. So you want them to be useful to society in general, and you are not just interested in the excellent ones who are good academically, like in terms of their grades and whatnot. You are interested in everybody, actually. So I'm curious if there is anything outside the curriculum, such as clubs where you would try to build up a certain kind of character or outgoing behaviors or whatnot. Do you have any of that?
Of course, we are a big university, and but there's another thing that happens here.
Mm.
Uh, so at the beginning, they are very excited about this whole like university life, how like the typical life you see in again popular movies and TV shows, how like it's all about parties and everything. Like up until 8 o'clock you study, and then you go to some club and all that.
8 a.m. you
And
mean?
8 a.m. Yes, absolutely. You know, sometimes I wonder what my schedule is like. Like I can stay in university for a long time as well. So what happens is they are excited at the beginning, and we have a couple of events that kind of incentivize students to have like this extracurricular life. But then eventually they find out that it's almost like impossible to combine it with studying, and you have to like sacrifice one or the other. And because they are under insane pressure from professors and parents, relatives, they kind of choose the studying, and that's where like these extracurricular activities kind of like take the second spot. And what's interesting is that even if people do clubs, and if they, like, for example, I don't know. Our Department of Linguistics has a number, like of them. Like I know there is like a huge enthusiastic community who like does like watch along movies and like some games and all that stuff. It all happens without our participation, which is really lovely. But who goes there? The A students who are already studying well, and the average mass again goes back home to their interests and to their comfort, and basically the rich get richer, and the smart get smarter, and the average kind of like student kind of stays on the same level. And again, it's not their fault, it's just how it is. And obviously you want to get out there and participate, but again, I cannot speak for everybody here. But I see this, it's called like the Matthew effect, or something, that like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, or like stuff like that. So yeah, I see that in university a little bit.
Okay, very interesting. Because I was expecting, like, for example, this manga interest. I was expecting for there to be a manga club, and now, of course, maybe you don't want to tell your professor about what you are doodling on the side. Oh, it's some manga character. But when you are at the club, you're like, oh my goodness, manga, and you basically share your passion with other like-minded people. But now what you are
Maybe they
describing is, yeah, not what I was hoping for.
Maybe they do. Maybe that happens like just outside university. I have no idea what their life outside university is like. Just like them, they always think that the professors are only in the university, and when they see the house outside on the street, they're like shocked. Like, is this really my professor? Like carrying bags of groceries. To them it's unusual. To me, like seeing them on the street is also unusual, and I have no idea what they do in their extracurriculars. Sometimes they tell me. But there is like one another sad story is that some of them also try to like juggle a job and studying. Now, this is something for the bachelor students in our country, at least. It's like kind of, it's not prohibited, but it's very not welcome,
Not
because
welcome. Oh, interesting.
not welcome. The thing is, our education system is kind of different in that, especially the linguistics department, since we study languages, that means we have to spend a lot of time in class. So our students are like, sometimes they spend 6 to 8 hours in university doing classes, because I know that in other universities, in Western universities, there are some subjects where you receive like 4 lectures and everything else is on individual study at home. And they are like responsible for managing their time and doing their assignments on time. Whereas here we basically know that students are not going to do much individually, so that's why we put them in classrooms, and at least they can do something in there. So that's why if a person also has a job, and because like again the tuition fees are kind of high, and they have to also work on the side, And this is where it gets complicated. There's no time for clubs then. There's no time for interest at all. And they like start to become like very adult very early in life, where they have to do both of these things. And these people are heroes, really. And also students who come from other cities and even countries. That's just like, to me, like, it's a heroic effort that you have to, to make in order to make that work. Because I was, again, privileged and very comfortable, because I was born in the city. I studied here and I work here, so for me it's easy to say. But for them, like, there are so many things they have to juggle, and sometimes I just have to, put myself in their shoes and say, oh, okay, I understand why you're like that. And we all have our challenges. So.
Okay, very good, very good. How is life outside the university, where your students are surprised to see you? Like, what do you do other than all these university activities? So you mentioned earlier the blog. What do you do outside of that context?
I'm a very like stay-at-home kind of guy, a little bit. Even though like. I get out there sometimes. Basically, the only person who gets me out of the house is my wife, because she's the one who likes to breathe some fresh air and get me out there, and usually like shout at me if I spend like two or 3 days at home not doing much apart from work. So she's the one who motivates me to go out. And because if I could, like, if I were like a bachelor, and like I would just be alone and single, I would probably be just teaching in university, coming back home, doing reading and writing, going to bed, and like not doing very much outside. And actually it's kind of sad, obviously, that I don't have much outside activities, because back in the day I used to go to museums and music festivals sometimes, but nowadays just however, we've been to a couple of concerts recently, and but it's again thanks to my wife. Without her, like, I wouldn't go. So yeah, the only thing I do is like just teaching reading and writing. That is basically my thing. The only thing I do, and I did during summer, because summer is my favorite season, obviously. Like, if there is one thing I love about my job, it's long vacations. Because during the summer, I could finally go for a run. I could do some physical exercises outside, which is like the best thing ever. I've picked this up like 2 years ago. Basically, I've always wanted to run, but I always had this fear and also a little bit of like health concerns, which like I was kind of like on the fence about. But then like 2 years ago, I started running, and I really, really enjoy this. Now it's colder outside. It's the end of October, so you gotta have like special like clothes and equipment and all that stuff, and I don't have that, so I usually I'm the most active in the summer, obviously. So.
Yeah, of course, with the weather that would be understandable for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, not much is happening outside, just grocery shopping.
But even free time, like when you are not teaching and you are at home, and like, will you read a book, for example, on your own? Will you do some not work related reading? Like, how is that like?
So usually just stuff around home, like a lot of things to do, like dishwashing, all that stuff. But mostly people know me as not even a music geek, but as a sports geek. I just basically follow a lot of sports competitions. I have friends from, I have my best friends from other cities, and we always talk about sports and like about football and hockey and tennis and Formula One, you name it. Because since my childhood, I've been interested in all that. I was always watching, like, since this has been basically, this basically developed thanks to my mom, I guess, because she was a big fan of like football and hockey. She got me into it, and I watched a lot of matches and events, and actually I connected my dissertation to it, because my dissertation is about the speech of sports commentators. My childhood dream was actually to become a sports commentator, yeah, but there are multiple reasons why I'm not in the field. This is not noticeable like in our speech right now, but in Russian, in my native language, there's like one sound that I'm pronouncing a bit unusually sometimes, and that kind of impedes me from being a perfect speaker. And sometimes my diction is not the best, so I'm not really cut for this job. So that's why I decided to study the speech of these people, because it's very interesting. Because what happens is that when you're watching a match or a race or whatever, a sports competition, as a commentator, and I've tried multiple times, I've participated in contests, and I've actually worked in the field. I've assisted sports commentators, like working with the sound and all that. What happens is that it's very interesting, because they have no idea what's going to happen in the next second or minute of the event. It's all unraveling in front of their eyes, and how they verbally like kind of register these events spontaneously, is very interesting, because sometimes there are so many things happening at the same time and they have to talk about all of it, or sometimes nothing is happening and they have to come up with something to say. And I think, and basically my dissertation was connected to how they structure their speech, because there is literally no structure. But there is a reason why people, when they listen to them, understand everything. So there are some clues, verbal clues, that basically tell you, okay, he stopped talking about this topic and now he starts talking about this. So there are some clues that help us. So usually sports, that's the thing, and not doing but watching, and that can get kind of addictive in its way, because you're usually a fan of a team, you follow the team, you follow like a particular athlete. And I just like sports for how it is all history. Like, this is what many people don't understand. Like, usually sometimes when I go to somebody's place and I say, okay, can you please turn on the TV? Like, there's like a game happening. Like, no sound, I just want to watch. And they're always like, why are you so like into it? And I'm always saying, oh, this is an important match. Like, if this team wins, this is going to happen. And blah, blah. And they're like, with you, it's always some historic match. Like, it's always going to be important. But that's what I like sports for. Every single match, every single event can be a part of history. And, everybody will remember the winner and all that stuff. And to me, this context is very important, is even more important than like what they're doing on the field or whatever. So yeah, that's my main, probably, like, interest, that hobby that I do passively, that I don't have to do anything much for it.
Which is, of course, narrative, right? Like,
Narrative.
oh, it's so amazing. It ties all together. Like, it's
Yes.
narrative. Like, for example, you're saying this, and I'm now thinking, well, of course, there is the final where, of course, there will be a winner. And, of course, that is a historical match, de facto. But every instance leading up to it can also be historical. For example, I'm now thinking of the 2004 Euro competition where Greece won. And there is this match against the Russia national team.
Yeah.
And the Russians are winning. And the Greeks managed to score a goal which qualifies them on goal difference.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a narrative unto itself, because it's like, well, if Verizas doesn't score that goal, we are out and we are not winning the whole thing. And of course, oh, it's so amazing.
Yeah. I even though I was very young, I do remember that Euro, because I literally, again, you got to imagine, I'm like 9 years old, maybe even like 8. I'm 8 years old, and I literally had like a calendar of this Euro tournaments, like hanging on, like poster was hanging on my door, and I wrote down every single result for those games. That was an incredible Euro, and yes, Greece won that year, and I remember how big of a deal this was.
Yeah, of course.
And it's only the final match, that one goal that decided everything. But there are so many things leading up to this, and I would even say that it's even more interesting to follow a particular athlete, not a team, because you're seeing, like, it's basically you are seeing the biography of a person unravel again in front of your eyes. For example, my favorite tennis player is Andy Murray. He's like a British tennis player, and also like he's a Sir Andy Murray now. He was knighted a long time ago. I remember, like, I literally know, like, if you ask me, I remember almost like most things about his career. I remember when at the age of 22, I think he got to the final of Australian Open, and he lost to the absolutely amazing Roger Federer that final, and he was crying, and I remember he said this very interesting line, like, I can cry like Roger, but I cannot play like him. And I remember, and that line stuck with me. I'm like, okay, this guy knows something. This guy is gonna be big one day. And look at him, twice Olympic champion, 3 times he won a tournament or the Grand Slam tournament, and so much joy he brought just because I know his story, and there's a documentary about how he basically injured his hip, and basically he had to end his career multiple times, but then he like kind of replaced it with a metal hip, and he came back and he won one tournament, being like a complete cyborg that he is, and how much it means to him, and how much he suffered on the court and off the court. And when you follow all that, you're almost like, I know it sounds very parasocial, and I know there's an issue with that as well, and I do try to stop myself from this, but I never like I never talked to him. I never like even wrote online to him. Like, it's never like that. But what's interesting to me is that sometimes it's just very nice to follow good people just to see what they are doing and what they are like. That's the reason why we subscribe to like some people. Like, for example, I know that your subscribers are subscribed not only for your Emacs tutorials, but again about your like life story and how you share the things about your huts and about like the recent fires, and we're really interested in how you live. And I think there's also like some responsibility that comes with it, like some like burden maybe. Do you feel that's like
I
as an influencer?
generally, yeah, just to say more generally, what you said, of course, is very fascinating, and I want to ask about that. But to answer to your question, is like,
Yeah.
yes, I do feel responsibility, because I think there are people who will see what you are doing and they will want to do it because it works, right? But online, you can always be a persona which has no consequence. Like right now, for me, I could basically tell you that I am a completely different person than who I am in practice. And if I am a good actor, of course, I can play that out, and you would never know. And if I am not careful with that, of course, somebody else will think that this is actual reality, and they will do something with it. And me, I don't want that. Me, I feel really responsible to be exactly who I am. And in the context of the hut, for example, I have said many times that I cannot take full claim for this and be like, oh, you know what? I did it because I am so amazing. I'm so smart. I'm so strong. I'm so good. I am the best, right? It's not that. It's like I benefited from a community of people that were supported. I benefited from circumstances that went my way. And these circumstances have a name and a surname. Like, I know the people. And of course, I did the work, but hard work alone wouldn't do anything. It's not that I am the hero that just makes the world in his own image. I am the hero because they made me a hero, that sort of thing, right? So I think it's always important to have that responsibility in mind so that you set the right expectations also, and you don't play to the audience and you prop yourself up in the process. Of course, this is something that happens a lot online, right? And I think that's the bad part of the parasocial, to use that word. That's the bad part of the parasocial relationship, where you mimic the parts that you cannot emulate, or emulating them would lead to some kind of bad outcome. But the good part of the parasocial is when that other person is responsible, and then you are inspired by something that is within reach or whatever.
Mhm. Yes, they can act as a role model, so to say. But again, this role model shouldn't be, again, too far from your reality as well. Like, I know there are so many people who, like, for example, they want to become like an athlete, for example. They want to be a great swimmer. And they're like, oh, I'm going to train like Michael Phelps. And you're like, you cannot possibly do that. Like, you are 14. Like, like, his reality is not equal to your reality. And when we take like social media, like, in another context, obviously you're just receiving snippets of their lives, and like, for example, I can be, very impressed with what's like my favorite player is doing on the court, but how is he or she off the court? I have no idea. Maybe they're like, like borderline criminal or something, and I will never know. So, got to be careful with that for sure.
Yes, for sure. Yes, 100%. And then, of course, this applies to the audience as well, which is uh, don't put anybody on a pedestal. Like, no human should ever be on a pedestal. Every human has flaws. And every human, again, to connect it to narratives, even in the context of a Greek tragedy, every human, even the most excellent human, has in them the potential for destruction in general, but self-destruction as well. Many stories are about self-destruction, about people being miserable out of their own excellence, I must say. But the point is, never put anybody on a pedestal and say, "Oh, this person is so great. Yeah, I should be exactly like that person," because now you are not talking about the real human.
Yeah, there is sharp. I guess there's like a thin line between being inspired by somebody, like naming somebody your inspirations, and actually, copying what they do, like one thing by another. It's just not the same. So yeah, you shouldn't put them to a standard. Like the only standard is like it's like this good idea is that I only care. It's not me who said it, but somebody said it. I only care about the people's opinions who. Sorry, I only care about the opinions of people who sit with me in the kitchen when I dine. Because if they tell me I'm doing something wrong, then I should really think about it. But if some person on the internet told me this, I shouldn't be interested, even if they have like 70 million subscribers or something. I don't care. No, I care about the opinion of people who are here in my kitchen, and we're having food together.
That's a good rule of thumb. Very good, because the person who is next to you actually cares about you. The person online who issues blanket statements, of course, even if they do it with the best intents, they are not factoring in the specifics of your case. It's impossible to do that, of course. So, of course, yeah, what you say, I think, is the right approach.
I even heard that there's this idea that as much as I sometimes, again, I was in the self-help kind of book, field as well, and I read most of them, and there are some good books in the field. I'm not gonna say that criticize them all. There are many people who say that Atomic Habits by James Clear and Deep Work by Cal Newport literally changed their lives. That's all right, but there is an issue that all self-help gurus, they kind of build an ideal of a human being that's like, and it's always the same. To be honest, I don't know how to put it into words. The most writers in that genre are like white privileged men, and they kind of build the image of a perfect white privileged man, and many of the and also entrepreneur, because some of the advice they give is impossible to be followed by people who have a 9-to-5 job, or like even less rigid schedule. And when they see this ideal example and how far away it is from their real life, obviously they are either sad, or they kind of quit their job to kind of mimic that. And that also doesn't end well sometimes. Maybe it works for some people, but I think it's the minority. So they all build like the same kind of ideal human being, and nobody can really stand up to that example, even themselves. Usually the things they say, again, they paint a pretty picture. Are they actually this picture? I doubt it. So there is also that. So that's why self-help, like I've basically said no to this field a long time ago, and I'm really happy about it. But to some like young people, they can find some cool things there.
Yeah. Of course. For me, one guiding principle is everything that you say, act out of it. Make sure that you can act on it, so that you don't set targets for things that you cannot commit to. And what this does in practice is it puts a natural brake on what you say. Because if I tell you, like every person should do entrepreneurialism and this and that and whatever, but I'm not doing it, to me, that basically tells me, well, I'm wrong to say this thing, because why am I not doing it? If it's right, why am I not acting out of that? And so this is kind of the guiding principle for what I want to say. So when I say something, which is not a lot, but when I say it, it's something that I do. And I think if people have this kind of approach, it naturally guards them in the realm of the possible for them.
Yeah. And there's another little thing that I again cannot find the name for, but there's also this thing, and I've noticed this like years ago, that there are some online personalities who, like for example, they are bloggers and they are blogging about how to blog, like this meta thing kind of. And the same thing again, because I am in academia and because I am interested in note taking, that's why I use Org-Rome and Emacs. I noticed there are a lot of note taking gurus who talk only about note taking. And whenever I see like a video tutorial about like Zettelkasten, and they say, okay, this is how to use a Zettelkasten, so let's make an evergreen note about how Zettelkasten is good. And I'm like, what is your field of interest apart from note taking? I always feel suspicious of these people, because is there anything you do outside of that where you actually practice it? There are some good people, again, in the sphere, and again, there are plenty of them. I'm not going to speak for all of them, but I get frustrated sometimes that people are talking about this meta stuff, and they don't really speak about what kind of job and work they actually do. Because how am I supposed to listen to their advice then? Like, you are blogging about how to blog. Well, my blog is different, so this doesn't apply to me. You are only you're only generating these views because people are interested. But what do you bring to the table apart from these kind of marketing strategies? Probably nothing. So this is an interesting thing that I've noticed, and maybe it's already old, but I see this time to time that people talk only about things they do, so to say, and when it comes to tools, it's kind of unusual that I see this kind of I don't even know, it's not a vicious cycle, but they're kind of lost in this kind of process of talking only about this thing.
Yeah, of course. It becomes self-absorbed, self-referential, and ultimately a goal unto itself. Which is
absolutely.
You want to learn this productivity method because it makes you more productive at this productivity method. And it's
yes.
Wait, that's not my job.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, I think the whole trap of the productivity cottage industry, which is we don't need to keep saying the same things over and over and generalizing and doing all that. What you need is to go back to what we were saying. Tell me, what are your desiderata? Flesh out what you are searching for. What are you working towards? You are working as a university professor. What does that mean concretely? What do you have to do? There are specific duties, things that are relevant, things that are irrelevant. Figure those out and work on those. I cannot issue a general pronouncement about what is productivity in abstract, and now you just follow my advice. That won't be helpful. And if I am really prescriptive, then I have to make assumptions. And of course, the more prescriptive I am, the more assumptions I have to make. And ultimately, that's not helpful to you because the assumptions do not apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, precisely.
Terrible.
Yeah. Well, and we have just built the system where everybody, and I'm also a victim of the system where, for example, if I want to do something well, my part of job or a skill I want to develop, my first intention is always to go to YouTube and to watch how other people do it. And this is actually normal. There is such thing as tacit knowledge, is when you actually understand how to do something by seeing somebody do it. And for a lot of things in life, this is impossible to do. For example, I want to be the best researcher. I want to be a good researcher. And I go online and I want to see what a life of a researcher actually is like. And you're literally seeing a person for multiple hours reading a book or underlining something in the paper, and it doesn't teach you anything. There are some pieces of knowledge that you cannot gain from watching others. So sometimes these kinds of instructions, they are useless even. For example, and this is debatable really, but there is this comparison. For example, if you want to be a good basketball player, for example, I want to work on my shot or my jump, I can watch my favorite player, 700 games of that player, and I can imitate how he throws, right? And totally fine. This is tacit knowledge. You can take advantage of it. But how to be a good researcher? I don't think there's explicit way to teach how to do it really, and in basketball as well, really. But at least you have some visual component here that helps you. Mm-hmm. And there are some other things in life like productivity that's it's I'm gonna say very straightforward thing, but it's all individual, and what productivity is to you is not to other people. So some people, productivity is delegating tasks to other people. To you, who, for example, does not have employees or assistants, or you just prefer to work alone, there's no delegation there. You just got to do it yourself, and how to do that. So there's that.
Yeah, there is that. But whatever it is you are doing, fundamentally, you have to learn it by practice and through trial and error. Because it goes back to that point we said earlier of future proofing, where if you try to anticipate what your work will look like in some possible world, then you are optimizing for that which you don't have, and you are trying to flesh out that which is not needed. There is no pressing need for, and ultimately you discard it. And I think once we get in the flow of trying things out, of course, you can learn from somebody. You can see, for example, how your favorite player does the 3-point shot. But eventually, you have to get on the court and practice 3-point shots. Like, you cannot just do it. Like, you can maybe figure out how a researcher does things either by watching some video or by even asking them. Like, you can find your favorite researcher, let's say, and send them an email. Hey, how do you did this? And maybe they are kind enough to tell you, but that still doesn't tell you anything in reality unless you go and practice it and see what works for you, what doesn't, and eventually figuring out the specifics of your individuality.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because like even like and it's not like not a new idea, because like in like for example Aristotle's Ethics, because that's literally the only philosophical book I've read. Like he distinguishes between knowledge wisdom and practical wisdom, right? It's like the I think in the Christian interview this word appeared, like phronesis, or like somebody was talking about phronesis or
Yeah, it
something.
was Christian Tietze like a couple of videos ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I've watched like an hour, and I've noticed that as well.
Yeah.
In English, they call it like prudence or practical wisdom, is like not only knowing but applying it to real life, because otherwise it's useless. Because we know, and everybody, I think, in their life knows a wise person who is just wise and like knows a lot of things but doesn't do anything with them, and like sits on a mountain somewhere, and people come to him or her for advice, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that, you will see somebody who wouldn't count as wise in the conventional sense. Like, you will go to a car mechanic or a dog trainer or some farmer or whatever, and they will tell you something that if you actually pay attention to it, you're like, wow, what did you just say that? Hold on, this is deep. Like, to give you a concrete example, I was many years ago, I was trying to learn how to train dogs and stuff. I'm actually very good with dogs. But the point is that there was this breeder, not even a trainer. And in the context of breeding dogs, he says that if you are not working towards something, so a specific type of dog you have in mind, like a hunting dog or a herding dog or whatever, if you are not working towards something, you are working against it. And I'm like, oh, hold on. Of course, you are a dog breeder, but what you just said works generally, because if I am scatterbrain about things in life, it's not that I am not working towards something, is that everything I do creates consequences which now prevent me from doing something else. So I have to undo these and then move towards something. And that's kind of what he was implying there, which is like, if you are not working towards a specific breed of dog, you have to undo that kind of breeding and start again with a new breeding. So, of course, that means a long time. But my point is that you can have those people who specialize in something really not wise in the conventional sense, and you're like, wow, what did you just tell me there?
Yeah, and they kind of philosophize about the activity that they are doing, and that's amazing. They come to their own conclusions through the things that they do, and you don't have to have a degree for that. You don't have, like, it's basically your skill. And when you do that kind of stuff, you understand way more about it, because you think on it on a higher level, I guess, and you kind of abstract from the minutia of like things that are kind of automatic to you, and then it becomes a part of you, and you can philosophize about it, which is amazing. Because I can I also give you an example of like
Of course.
like for example, in my at my parents' place, near my parents' place, there's this shop where they like sell how do you call that? It's like things for home, like all the stuff, like you can buy a pan, like something for the kitchen, or a lamp, or all that stuff kind of. And in that shop there is this guy, he works there since like I was very little, and like it means like for 25 years for sure he works there. A very simple guy, and he basically helps people with electronics. So whenever somebody comes up with something broken, he either tells them buy this battery or do this or do that, and he never quit his job, and he was always so good at it. And even though he was kind of like like speechless, like he was silent, he never said anything, but like whenever you put something on his table, he would do like everything with, he would fix everything, or he will give you the particular detail, it will fix it. And he was doing it with such efficiency, and when you actually talk to him, you see how wise he is. Not because he read a lot of books, but because he saw so many of these little things that that you just can't but run to him for advice, because you do not know any other person who is more, well versed in what he's doing, and that's incredible. It can be this small, and there are so many heroic people who do very minor jobs all around the planet, and we don't think about them. We only think about effective managers and how they change the world, but sometimes you can find one wise person in a place you least expect. And unfortunately, this story has a bad ending because the shop was closed very recently. And I have no idea where this guy went, and I do not know where to go for electronic wisdom anymore, because he's just gone. They were bought by some corporation that sells groceries, and that's the end of the story. But I will remember that guy to the rest of my life, because there are so many people who say oh, I'm gonna switch jobs because this shows me how universal and versatile I am. And this is what the modern youth does. They work for half a year here, for a year there, because that kind of improves their CV. This guy worked for at least 25 years in this kind of area, and I have never I'm not gonna say I saw him happy, but I would say that he was competent in that, and he never wanted to quit, because that's kind of his, power or whatever. So,
Yeah.
I see what you meant about the breeding thing, and this person.
But it's also interesting in a more general sense because of what you said, which is well, I'm doing something and I'm able to abstract away from the particularities of it and think about it at a higher level, which now no longer is about the thing itself. If I think about it a little bit more abstractly, I can talk about other things which are completely unrelated, and actually what I am saying now applies to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And again, I can speak from the perspective of a teacher, professor, because I do the same thing. When I started, I was always first year, here's the lesson plan. I got to do everything in the lesson plan. This is the level I'm thinking on. But then 5 years later, 8 years later, I come here and I do not need a lesson plan. I'm thinking about it in a very different terms, and I understand the bigger picture. And I guess that's how it works. That's how competence works in general. And you can think about other things that I've been talking about. Because when I started out, I didn't think about mass education and its repercussions, right? I never thought about that this is bad, or at least if not bad, it's not bad. Nothing is objectively bad, 100%. But it has its disadvantages. But back in the day, I never thought about it. Now I do, and this kind of changes the way I teach as well. So it happens everywhere like that.
But also you told me earlier about the average and how you framed that. It's also interesting because you are well, we also have to have situational awareness in practice. It's well, we have to consider, given these prevailing conditions, what applies. So of course, changing those would change the kind of average we would get. And I think that's interesting because now it gives you an understanding of the phenomenon in a more rounded way. Whereas otherwise you will be oh no, these kids, they are so lazy, blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't give you a rounded understanding. You are not actually seeing what is happening.
It's very easy to get to that kind of thinking, to this default thinking that everything's bad, the new kids just don't have it, and the world is going to a very bad place. But actually sitting down and thinking about it is what takes effort, and many people are not willing to take to make this effort, unfortunately. And it's very easy to think things that everybody talks about, and this is where propaganda comes into play. And Like I know people who just really believe things that, and not only students, my colleagues sometimes, that are, you know, just because they are popular in mainstream thoughts, everybody kind of copies them, but actually thinking about them and saying, you know, the reason why this student is like struggling is not because they have like low intellect or something, but maybe because there are some other reasons behind that. And nobody is willing to think. Well, some people are not willing to think about it.
Yeah, of course. But that's actually, I think, if we were to say, okay, what is the thing of wisdom? I think it's that. It's like the ability to entertain a view from a position that is not just your view. So to be able to see something from many angles, and I think that's ultimately the mark. So you can understand it, to say what I said earlier, in a three-dimensional way.
Yes, yes. That's what I try to, relay to my students. And I know it sounds like, and the worst thing is when you say that, they almost get offended because they like, I already know how to do that. You don't have to teach me that, And when I tell them, oh, read this or write this, like, oh, why? I already know this. But that's like kind of an illusion that you have with the amount of information you have around you. Some people understand it. Some students are like, I don't need to be a critical thinker. What are you talking about? And some of them are like, oh, it's obvious. But today we talked about this a lot. That there are many obvious things that are not that are not followed. You know it's objectively good, but you don't practice it, and it's not enough to just know.
Yeah, and what you actually are missing is not just the knowledge, is the embeddedness of the knowledge. So, of course, the knowledge is here. It has to sink in, as it were. It has to come to the heart or the gut or whatever. Basically, it has to be part of you. There is this movie, The Karate Kid, and when I watched it when I was a kid, I didn't make much of it, but thinking back to it years later, I was like, what an amazing event. There is this karate master, so Mr. Miyagi, and this American boy wants to throw punches and kicks and impress the girl. He's like, I will get the girlfriend now. And he wants to learn karate for that. And Miyagi is like, okay, you want to learn karate? Let's start learning karate. And he's like, okay, here, take this brush and paint the fence for me. But you can only do it using this motion, up and down. No other motion allowed. You cannot do sideways. You cannot do anything else. Up and down, up and down. That's all you will do. And of course, the American boy does that. He's finished. He's like, okay, Mr. Miyagi, I'm done. Now let's do martial arts. And he's like, okay, you want to learn martial arts? Let's do that. Take this sponge and this bucket of water, and I want you to wash all the glass walls, right? All the windows and stuff. But you can only do it with this sideways motion, half circular motion, nothing else, right? This and that all day. This is what you will do. And basically, the point I get from that is that, well, it's not just that you have to learn how to throw the punch. It's also that you have to build the character of learning how to throw a punch, to build the character of learning how to go through the training, the character of persisting and doing it, even though it's not nice. It's not the Hollywood kind of thing that attracts the girl, but it actually what makes you a karate master.
Yeah. I have a very similar example. I just know a very young gentleman who plays the guitar very well. Like goes to to an actual coach and does like incredible guitar parts. And obviously, the guy with the guitar is usually the center of attention, right? So there is a little bit of social benefit you can receive from playing the guitar. But whenever he comes in to a group of people and plays these incredible jazz or hard rock kind of like parts, everybody at the beginning is like, oh my god, he's so amazing. And in 15-20 seconds everybody kind of dozes off and they don't listen. They don't care because it's not interesting. Because yes, it's hard, but it's not interesting. And then the other guy who knows like 3 chords and plays a popular song and sings off the beat, does well, and everybody everybody loves him. But the previous guy who spent years of formal education, musical education, does not get the attention that his skill could have. And what eventually happens is that whenever you get good at one skill, people either take it for granted, or they don't really care, because it's like so unusually complex that they can't appreciate it very well. So, with
Yeah,
karate, I guess it's the same thing. Not many people can appreciate like a karate master.
correct. You might appreciate the punch, like the flying kick or whatever that you see on TV, but you
Yeah.
don't appreciate the work ethic, the life that supports that makes that possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, I say we call it a day, maybe, or I don't know.
Of course.
We have
That was
covered a lot.
exactly 2 hours. That was exactly 2 hours. That's exactly the time I had.
Unless you have something
Thanks.
final to say, I don't know.
No, thank you. That was a wonderful conversation. I'm really happy to be here, and I wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors.
Thank
I
you.
guess I speak from the community. We're all rooting for you, and you're doing a great job. Really nice to talk to you.
Thank you, and the same to you. Good luck with everything, and of course, good luck with all the difficulties with the students and what they do, what they don't do, and maybe you will also learn something in the process, like in the spirit of seeing things 3D, as we said. And yeah, there is more to the story. We will find out.
Yeah, sure. We'll work on that.
Very well. Take care, Maxim. Bye bye. I will close
Bye
and then
bye.
stop the recording.
Okay, wonderful.
Bye bye.
Bye.
And closing and stop recording. Take care, folks. Goodbye.